Okay. Hi, Facebook. This is Emily from the Alpine Shop in Kirkwood, and we're here for Adventure Racing 101 class number 3, biking and teamwork. Earl is just adjusting our store sound levels, so he'll be right back. But just wanted to say welcome and glad you're here, and then also welcome to all of our wonderful attendees. And we have two very special guests today from out of town, Mr. and Mrs. Erlandson. You want to wave to the crowd here? Can I, maybe you want to wave to Facebook too? Yay! So this is Earl's mom and dad, and they're just visiting before Thanksgiving, so they came to class too. So welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for letting us.
Do you have any tips as the parent of an adventure racer? What's the best way to support them?
Just do whatever you can do. Go to a race if you can and help. And
Yeah.
Volunteer at a checkpoint?
Don't get too excited if they don't get in.
Because they're probably okay.
yeah.
Just lost a little bit. Cool. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about biking first, and then go into the broader subject of teamwork, and just kind of overview. Teamwork is really what brought me into the sport of adventure racing. In high school and college, I played soccer, and then kind of after graduating, I was, kind of looking for something to do that's athletic, and played recreational soccer for a little bit, and I really enjoyed that, but just was looking for a little bit something different. So endurance sports, running, biking, I did the MS 150 a couple years, was really fun and kind of piqued my interest in longer distance events. But the team aspect of an adventure race, being with your teammates for the whole time, having to work together, and then just getting to share the absolutely ridiculous things that race directors put you through, that was really appealing to me, and it's just kind of kept me interested and motivated in the sport of adventure racing since 2009. So that's my pitch, and that's why I think the sport is really unique from a lot of other endurance sports, because you are reliant on your team as well as yourself. Want to say hello? I already introduced your mom and dad.
Well, we can just go into...
Yes. Just prove that you're here.
I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to just get right into aspects of biking in an adventure race. And the most important thing, number one, you need a bike. This question used to be very simple, as you need a mountain bike. And in the last maybe 5 or so years, there's been a lot of kind of subtle variations of the mountain bike that have, people are asking, can I use my gravel bike? Can I use my fat tire bike? Can I, kind of all these little iterations of the core mountain biking setup. And for this race, you need a mountain bike. If you have a gravel bike, not okay. A hybrid bike, not okay. You need a legitimate mountain bike. It can be a hardtail, like we have here. It can be a full suspension. It can be a fat tire bike, because it's designed as a mountain bike to be used on single track. And within the mountain bike category, if you want to use 29er, 26er, those are the wheel sizes. 27.5, another wheel size. 650B fatty, another very subtle variation. So there's all kind of wheel size iterations that fall into that acceptable category of mountain bike. But for us, because you are on single track so much during this race, you need to have a bike that's prepared and designed to handle trail single track riding. So I would say the bikes that we see for this race. Actually, can you talk a little bit about the bikes that we see for this race?
Okay, so... Yeah. Since there's a lot of new people that this is kind of their first race, it's super fun to see the bikes that people use. Some of them are their mountain bike that they had in college, and they're 40 now. So a lot of advances or older, and but they're still great bikes. and there's a lot of people taking advantage of the tune-up special that we've got going on for the racers. I think that's good till next Tuesday. So anybody out there that wants to get their bike in with 8-point tune-up, get them in as soon as possible so that we can get them done for you before the race. So they have to be in by Tuesday, a week from yesterday, to get them done under the program. We can do them after, but you won't get the discount. But yeah, so we're going to see a lot of 26-inch hardtail front suspension bikes. They'll be great. They're going to be great. I mean, just any mountain bike is going to be out there. We're going to have some people are going to have really expensive full suspension bikes because they bike a lot. But you know, as long as it's a mountain bike and it's mechanically sound, it will be a great bike for the course. And we have a great, really happy with how the biking is turning out for this course because you're going to get a nice mix of everything. And you know, which tires are going to be the best? Just a regular mountain bike tire, don't overthink it.
One that holds air.
One that holds air. So, yeah, and then we're just going to. So, a couple other things that. Some other things that might make.
Or actually, sorry, can we go back to the bike for a little bit? So I just want to point out when we say, you know, hardtail or full suspension, I want to make sure that everyone's like kind of on board with what we're talking about.
Do you want to have somebody like shine the camera so that they can see the bike? Do you want me to hold the bike up?
I think everyone that's watching online, go Google hardtail mountain bike, full suspension mountain bike, and you'll get what we're talking about. But for here, we want to explain.
And that's a disadvantage of not coming to classes.
Right, you don't get
all.
the bike.
You're not going to see all the props.
So what we have here is a hardtail mountain bike. What that means is there is no suspension in the rear triangle here, so this is just like one solid frame. A full suspension mountain bike is going to have some sort of shock in the rear triangle, and there's all different proprietary styles of that. But basically the rear wheel will be suspended in a full suspension mountain bike, and that just smooths out the bumps in the trail a little bit more. It allows you to ride with a little bit more seated riding style because your body doesn't have to constantly be jockeying around and adjusting your weight to get over obstacles. So it's a little bit, in Missouri you can get away with a hardtail mountain bike for just about any of our trails, but kind of as you go into gnarlier and gnarlier terrain, a full suspension mountain bike might be a little bit more forgiving on your body. Then in the front here, so this is the just front suspension or the shock fork that most hardtail mountain bikes will have. And then, so that just allows the front wheel of the bike to absorb any impact or uneven obstacle or terrain that you're going over, especially when you're on trails. So this is really nice. It just lets you kind of use your body weight to your advantage to hop over different logs and rocks and things. And so the hardtail setup is, I would say, the most efficient style of mountain bike for adventure racing in general. Obviously once you get into the shorter sprint races versus the 10-day, multi-day events, that kind of might sway one way or the other, but in general, I've had a hardtail mountain bike since I started adventure racing, and it's been great. Like, that's really all I ride. I've never actually owned a full suspension mountain bike. The other kind of small variation that you'll see is just the style of fork with a hardtail bike. I started with a suspension fork, then the last couple years Earl and I rode with rigid forks, so that means that there's no shock absorption in the front fork here. It makes the bike a lot lighter. I think we saved 2 pounds maybe between the suspension fork and the rigid fork. There's less moving parts to brake on a rigid fork. It's just really basic fork design. But it is a little bit more harder on your body. So you just have to use the shock absorption in your wrists and your elbows and your shoulders a little bit more, and then you get tired quicker. So you just kind of trade off, okay, a rigid bike is lighter, it's easier to go uphill with that lighter bike, and the power transfer is more immediate. However, it's a little bit more tougher on your body. So if you're depending on where you are in your stage of life or your goals for the race, like maybe you don't care if you beat your body up and you can win a 12-hour race, versus if it's, you know, maybe you're coming back from an injury or you're going for a really long bike outing, you might want that suspension up front. So that's just kind of the general styles of bikes. As far as tires, like we said, most of the tires that we've ridden in adventure racing are about between 1.9 and 2.2 inches, somewhere around there, and just a really kind of nothing terribly knobby as far as the tread pattern goes. Just because in adventure racing you're going to be on a variety of different terrain. You're going to be on pavement some of the times. You're going to be on gravel some of the times. You'll be on single track dirt trails. So you just kind of want a just good quality all around tire that can handle a little bit of everything. Not too knobby so it's slow on roads, but also not too slick so that you still have some traction when you're on the dirt. So just a good, well-rounded tire, no pun intended, and that holds air, of course, as long. Okay. Anything about components?
The other thing I think was the shock lockout.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. So Earl just reminded me to talk about the shock lockout. So this is either most forks, depending on, you know, their price point and range in cost, they'll have a lockout. So this one is actually on the fork, which if you turn this little dial down here, it actually, I just turned it on. So it locks out your shock, so it's really not very absorptive. And then you can also open it back up for when you're on tougher terrain. So locking the shock out just allows you to climb a little bit better, and it just makes the bike a little bit more responsive to the power that you're putting into it. So if you're on a road, you might want to remind yourself and remind your team, okay, if you guys have adjustable shocks to close them so that your bikes aren't bouncing around and you're wasting energy on the road when you don't actually need any shock absorption. But then also remind yourself and remind your team when you're back on the trail to open those shocks up and have everyone be a little bit more comfortable.
If you forget, you'll remind yourself really fast once you hit the trail and you're like, oh, this is really rough.
Yeah.
So maybe I should turn my shock back on.
Okay. Components? Chain rings?
I don't think we need to get into all that unless you want to.
I would just do, if anyone's kind of weighing the different options between how you set your bike up components-wise. For me, I didn't actually care about this until like a couple years ago when I maybe was taking adventure racing a little bit more seriously. The first bike that I did the Castlewood race on, I bought for $200 off of Craigslist. It was just like a regular, little hardtail. I think it was actually a 26-inch wheel mountain bike, and it was perfect. Like, it got me interested in the sport of mountain biking. I was pretty nervous about riding on a trail, so I just had a inexpensive bike and rode it around and was like, okay, this is still terrifying, but I'll give it a shot. So kind of been working my way through bikes now. I think that bike had a triple chain ring on the front. Now this one has a double, and now the bikes that we ride during our races both have single chain rings up front. So that's just kind of how the bike is set up. There's kind of a myth maybe that a single chain ring up front isn't appropriate for adventure racing because the gear ratio is not as wide as something with a double chain ring up front. Totally untrue in our experience. I think we have 32 chain rings in the front.
So the difference is we're just going to touch on this, but pretty much most of your mid to higher end bikes today are coming in with a single chain ring up front.
That's this thing right here.
Right up here. It'll be a 32 tooth where they can go smaller, and then your rear cassette is going to be an 11-speed cassette, and it'll be a 1042. So your small one is a 10, your largest one is a 42.
It's these cogs back here.
And now they're actually making a 12-speed which is going to get you up to a 50, so a 1050. So with the 1142, you're getting basically all the same ratios as you got with the 3x8, 2x10. There's just so much overlap in between those things. So with the 1x11, you're pretty much getting all the same ratios that you would need, and you eliminate a front derailleur, a front shifter, and a cable for that, and extra chain rings. So it makes the bike lighter, and there's less stuff to go wrong. I mean, you talk to most bike techs, the thing that they least like doing a bike is adjusting a front derailleur, just because it's complicated, it's not fun, it's never perfect. People that aren't familiar with shifting don't really know how to optimize their shifting experience with the front derailleur. So it's like, oh, it's always rubbing, blah, blah, blah. Where it's just more, sometimes it's just operator error too. So just over time, I just feel that the front derailleur is going to eventually go away on most bikes. But it's just going to take time. But, okay. So for those at home,
This is important.
this is important. So this hook or cord that's coming out from behind the bike is what we're talking about. It's called a bike tow.
There's a little handle on the end.
So is what this is used for is, normally we're going to use it on a road or a gravel road. You're not going to use it on single track. But if you have one rider that's kind of struggling to keep up, this is one way to help them keep up. So if Emily was on a bike behind me, she would just put that in her two fingers.
This is, you don't have to grip with huge paws. You just 2 fingers or even 1 finger, and then you just ride your bike normally. And if something gets a little sketchy or too fast or the corner's slippery, all you do is you just let it go. And then this little piece of PVC keeps the toe from getting into the next rider's rear wheel.
So it's very beneficial for long hill climbs and just longer road sections. It's very helpful. The person that's doing the towing, 20-30% extra work, depending on how things are going. Sometimes it's more than that, but for the most part, as long as things are normal, that's about where it is. But the person on tow, 60 to 70% energy efficiency to them. So it helps them stay on board with the rest of the team, and it helps them conserve some energy that might be needed later in the race. For a sprint race, probably not going to use it too much. For longer races, it's definitely beneficial. One thing is, I would practice this as a team before doing it in a race, because I've seen some very kind of bad accidents that have happened just because they did it in a race and they hadn't practiced and they hadn't communicated. Because if you're on tow and all of a sudden you need to come to a stop or something like that, even when you're not on tow, that happens. So that's one thing, is when you're pace lining as a team, you have to be very vigilant of the people in front of you, because everything comes really fast when you're close together and if somebody needed to stop for some reason. So communication is very important when you're traveling as a team, is slowing, stopping, turning, all those things. That's going to be important, because we don't want to have any really bad bike accidents. That's not any fun. So,
and even if you don't have time, you can also make these. They're very popular to be made out of retractable dog leashes too. And just if you go that route, it's a little bit simpler to make, because you just zip tie a retractable dog leash to your seat post or your saddle. But you do have to be really careful when the person that's on the tow comes off, and if you let go in a way that the retractable leash goes flying around, and it's really easy to get caught up in this rear wheel and cause a lot of problems. So if you're going to go, the manual towing route, just be practice, just like Earl said. And if you're not, speaking as someone who's like, I'm on tow quite a bit, I feel like I'm a pretty strong biker, but I can benefit a lot going up hills by being towed. And then it just helps me be stronger on foot later on if I didn't gas myself on the bike section and I got help from my teammates there. So, just because you're on tow doesn't mean that you're suffering or dying or, you're the weak link. It actually is a very smart strategy move so that later on in the race, this person can be stronger without help, like on a trekking section. But even if you don't have a manual way to connect yourselves, just by riding in a pace line, so riding everybody in a line, trying to stay in each other's draft, you can still save a lot of energy just by riding smartly on one pace line. So again, communicate. One of our favorite race memories, I think, is when we were in Florida and we were racing with a couple of guys that we've never gotten to race with before. Hi, Joe and Jeff, if you're watching. They're from the East Coast, and their strategy for paceline was we had all of our bike computers were set in kilometers, and they were calling, I think it was like to the decimal point, kilometers per hour that the lead person needed to be going. So 25.4 kilometers per hour, and then that would be like the pace. And then if someone needed to go slower, 24.6 kilometers per hour, and we all adjusted, and it's like kind of silly, but it really helped communicate to the team how everybody was feeling, and we went at a pace that was appropriate for that part of the race and how we were all feeling at that time. So it's a really great experience. If you all have bike computers, make sure they're all set to the same units, probably miles, but you can go kilometers too if you want. And just, kind of make sure that everyone has the same idea of what they're doing.
So bike computers, we'll just segue into bike computers. I would highly recommend that at least one team member, if not two team members, have a bike computer on their bike. So bike computers are legal to use.
The non-GPS.
But non-GPS. So just your basic speed sensor computer. The other thing is I'd recommend when you're doing your maps the night before, like how far do we go before we make turns on the bike? So it's like, okay, so we're going to be, for single track it's going to be a little bit hard, but you might be riding on some roads, just
maybe.
Maybe. But it's like, okay, so
What's the name of the road?
Johnson Street. So you'll be riding on Johnson Street, and then you're going to go, let's just say you need to go 1.5 miles on the map, and you're going to turn left on Robin Street. So the navigator is like, okay, we're going to go 1.5 miles, and we're going to turn left. So somebody that has a computer, I always zero mine every time we make important turns, because I'm not navigating, but I'm the guy that's responsible for keeping track of distance. So he'll be like, okay, we're going to go 1.5 miles, so we'll do 1.5 miles, turn left on Robin Street, I'll re-zero, and then he'll shout the next distance that we need to go. Now there's certain times where it's very cut and dry, it's not a big deal because there's a lot of street signs. There's other times where you're out
on fire roads
there's roads
may or
and
may
trails
not be
out there that are on the map, but there's no street sign and there's nothing like that. But it's like you're gonna have to count 1, 2, 3. You're counting roads and distance to find that one that's going the way you want. So it's just it's another checks and balance in the system of, have we gone far enough? I don't know. How far did we go on a computer? And sometimes you have a computer that malfunctions, or it's like, I told you to recalibrate, I didn't hear that, little things like that. So you have to work backwards to kind of figure those kind of things out. So highly recommend at least one, if not two team members have a bike computer. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
So you say no GPS, does that mean no screen to tell you your map? or you can't use GPS for speed?
Yeah. Okay, so Garmin makes like a basic 100 computer that all it does is it's a speed, just a speed and distance. Those would be okay. But no, nothing with a screen and direction.
Nothing with like waypoints.
Mm-mm. That's called cheating.
Right.
And that's sad. Not encouraged. So yeah, just a basic computer. If you want to carry a GPS, we talked about this before, we'll have bags that you can turn it on, seal it up, put it in your pack, and then we'll have to ask to see it after the race. And then you'd have your GPS track of the race, but we can't have them visible during the race. So, good question. Anything else on bike computers? Next, I'll talk about what we call a bento box or a feed bag. This just mounts right here in your top tube. There's a bunch of different kinds available. I got a bike tool in here now, but I normally keep food. So, like we talked about before, there is a bike drop, so it'd be okay to put food in one of these, leave it with your bike.
It's just a way to have things be really easily accessible to you while you're riding. If you think about, you're wearing your Osprey pack and you're trying to get something out of the pockets and you're trying to ride your bike too, and it's just kind of can get complicated really quickly. So if you can have something that's a bento box that's just right in front of you, really easily accessible, you can do it with one hand, it just is more convenient. And then having it be convenient also encourages you to eat more too. So if if you have all the food, 10,000 calories for the race, which is way too much, but it's in your pack in the bottom of it, you're not going to eat it and you're just carrying around dead weight. So just make sure your food is really easily accessible, and a bento box can really help with that.
And I'll even pre-open some packages in a bento box just so it's easier, even easier. It's take a scissors, cut the tops off of them, kind of peel them so that it's easy, easy's faster, and you're just going to eat. One thing we didn't talk about is back when we did the food class is if it's cold, food's going to freeze. One of my first races I did, this was back a long time ago, when Power Bar was one of the first people that actually made Power Bars. Well, those freeze, and it's like frozen taffy, and you'd have to break it off and put it in your mouth to get it to thaw out and chew, and that's all I bought for food. It was a long day. Fortunately, it was only a 12-hour race, and we got some food halfway through, but it's your food could freeze. The other thing is you have the water in your bladder. In the bladder, it's not going to freeze, but it can freeze in the drink tube. So one thing to do to prevent that is take a drink and then blow the water back out into the bladder, and then that will keep it from freezing. The other thing is they do make some insulated stuff that you can wrap your hose with, but the bite valve can still freeze too. Right now it hasn't been that cold, but we're still, a month out, so it's
a couple weeks.
Or a couple. We need a month, we're in good shape. We're in really good shape, but just keep in mind that those things can happen, especially your food on your bike, because if you drop your bike at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to get to it till a designated time, so it could be sitting out for 2 or 3 hours.
Or 8 hours until you get there. You never know.
You never know, right?
Maybe you'll ride your bike for 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes of the race, and that's it. And just, one more thing about food. This is probably not going to be applicable for a December race, but the opposite is true. Also, if you're racing in June or July or August, and you pack a bunch of chocolate items, not that I would ever pack any chocolate for any of my races, but chocolate melts really quickly and makes a terrible mess in hot weather. So, in case you decide you like this sport and you do a summer race, stay away from the actual chocolate and like maybe go to Oreos because those are a little bit better for hot weather. That's
I think for biking, rear red flashing light is mandatory gear. There's many different options. This is like a USB rechargeable one. There's other ones that are battery powered. Here's another one. So we have different options in the shop, but you know, as long as it's red and flashes, and we're good. Okay. Any questions on red flashing lights? Yes,
Does it have to be on bike or backpack or
helmet? Bike.
On bike.
Yep.
And if you want to have more on your pack or your helmet, you're welcome.
But these need to be affixed.
Just on the back right now in the front.
Right.
Just on the back.
Just on the back. We need all the bikes in before it gets dark. We need everybody in before it's dark. So, but this is precautionary, and a lot of races, even during daylight hours, we would like you to have red flashy lights on when you're riding on the road. Just another thing to make you more visible.
Pedals?
So, two options with pedals. Either or is going to be perfectly fine for this race. We're going to have a lot of racers just racing with your normal flat pedal and tennis shoes. And then other people are going to have the clipless pedals and the shoes that have the cleat on the bottom to clip in. So the only, they both have their pluses and minuses. For racers that want to use their bike shoes, you can leave your bike shoes at the bike drop with your helmet. But then when you're done, when you transition from foot to bike, you need to bring your regular shoes with you, and you can wear your cycling shoes. We're not going to transport any gear for anybody, so and that's kind of a team decision on how you want to do it, because there's going to be some teams where you have 4 people and 2 people are clipped in and 2 people are on flat pedals. Doesn't matter, just something to talk about. You just, when you're transitioning, you don't have to change shoes.
Shoes. Can you leave like a regular pair of shoes with the bike as your bike shoes?
Sure.
The same as the shoes that
You just need to carry the other pair with.
Yeah.
And that's not a crazy idea, because it's like, if your feet are really wet and your shoes are wet, if you want to put on a dry pair of socks and shoes that you left at the bike drop, that's fine. You just need to carry the other pair with you as well.
Do you have to carry both pairs if you ditch the bike before the finish line?
No.
If you leave one pair with
So like,
you,
let's just say that you got on your bike and you went to another spot and we're like, oh, we're going to have you paddle again, or we're going to have you trek again, and you leave the bike, you could leave that second pair of shoes and socks with the bike. You just need to pick them up again when you go. Good question.
The helmet can stay there too?
Yes. Yep. Rear saddlebag. Highly recommend that you have at least 1 or 2 of your teammates have one of these. So this mounts right under here. So is what I like to have in mind is all kinds of fun stuff.
Secret plastic bag. Oh,
I always carry 2 CO2 cartridges. I'd recommend that at least, if you're using CO2, that at least everybody in your team carries 1 at minimum, because sometimes you use these and they misfire. Inflator. Zip ties can fix pretty much anything. Tube.
And one thing about tubes, just check in with your team before the race and see what size tires and wheels everybody has. In a pinch, you can kind of swap tubes between 26 and 29-inch wheel sizes, but it's kind of a 50-50 shot if it's going to to work. So just make sure you have the correct replacement tube size for everybody's wheel that they're riding.
Everybody should, and each team member should be carrying a tube for their own bike.
Do you
But
need tire levers individually, or
I don't think so.
I don't think so. And then I carry a tire lever. Hatch kit. Somewhere buried in here is another spare derailleur hanger. This is like a boot kit, so if you cut a sidewall, you can lay this in, but also a goo wrapper or something like that will, or a dollar bill. You lay that in if you blow out a sidewall, and that will keep the tube from falling out. These are more useful for people that are set up tubeless. These are like those little, like a sticky strip, and you use this insertion tool, so you, wherever there's a hole, you push that sticky strip through and then pull it back out, and then it just becomes a plug in the tire. More often used when you're set up tubeless, and if you got the sealant where it's working, if you're lucky, you can get that to hold without changing it, and you just need to get air back in it. And then a multi-tool, which was in my pencil box. Yeah, derailleur hanger too. But for an 8-hour race, I don't know that you really need all, the basics. But they can get all this stuff and make it. The other thing I'll carry is a connector link in case you break a chain, or it becomes, you need to break a derailleur and you need to make a single speed. With a connector, you can do that too.
I'm not familiar with a derailleur hanger. What do you use it for?
Oh, that's what keeps, so your rear triangle on your bike, this piece right here is what the derailleur hangs to, or it attaches to. The derailleur hanger is the weakest part in the system, so if you put too much pressure on something, normally you'll hit something, you'll crash, or a stick will get caught in here, bind it up. The derailleur hanger is going to be the piece that bends or breaks before
Your very expensive
your derailleur. So by carrying an extra hanger, you can take out the old one, put in a new one. You might have to tweak your derailleur a little bit, but you can continue to go. If you do damage here, if you don't have a hanger and you at least have a connector link, you can figure out, you can just pick a random gear that you might think is beneficial, break the chain, put in the connector link to make it tight, and then you at least have a single speed bike to keep going versus having no speeds and walking. Ultimately, you don't want to do any of it. That's your goal. You don't want to practice these skills on a race, but after time and enough racing, those things happen. And it's like you're there, you've spent money to be there, your team's all relying on finishing. This being able to know how to do these things at least gets you a finish time and not a DNF in most cases. And there's teams that do amazing things with their bikes to keep them going, especially when you get into a 7-day, multi-day race. You might have 3 bikes that are not working well and one that's barely working, but after you've covered 300 and some miles of just crazy terrain, just to have a bike that rolls is sometimes pretty impressive. And it's like you spend all this time getting it dialed in, you want it perfect, and then after 3 hours of biking, it's been through 3 creeks, sand, mud, and it just creaks and grinds and just, come on baby, let's keep going. So, yeah. Mat board, These are designed to go like so. It just mounts right up on the front of the handlebars, like that. Navigator can put his map, fold it up right in here, or her map. Very important. And then this is Emily's map board, and she has a compass built into it, so you have what north is, and they also spin, so you can always keep your map rotated, so it's oriented with the terrain that you're going in. You don't have to like pick it in and out.
Did you make that or buy it?
I bought it.
Okay.
Yeah. But we kind of talked about it, I think, last time. That's we.
Realize what it looked like.
Yeah, you can. I mean, obviously, this bottom. I think it's like aluminum down here, and then it's part aluminum, part plastic. Like that's kind of hard to replicate with a homemade map board. But like this piece of corrugate plastic, like fine, go find any election sign out there. Like that's what this is basically. And then a couple binder clips, and then boom, you've got at least a flat surface to clip your map to. And then if you can figure out a good way to attach it to your handlebars or your stem, then you're pretty much got all the bases covered. So obviously this is really like slick and easy to use tool. But I don't think it's that complicated, and it's actually kind of fun to make some of your own gear too. So, just Saturday or Sunday morning, make a cup of coffee, some good music on, get your little like workbench set up, and just see what you can come up with what you have around your house.
Or just find somebody at work that's got a 3D printer and you're good to go.
Yeah. The important thing is not, if you do have a map board that has a compass in it, to not really have any metal around the compass to kind of sway the needle one way or the other. So just keep that in mind too.
So this is just something that is another option for when you're doing a lot of cold weather riding. I don't know that many people have this in their arsenal, but there's people that do. These just go over the top like so. So it basically becomes a sleeping bag for your hands. So on a day where it's 20 degrees or so, something like this, and you're wearing a very light glove and your hands stay pretty comfortable, and my hands I lose my hands really fast. So these have really been able to help me ride in colder weather. And then I have, like for my fat bike from Minnesota, I have, basically it is a big sleeping bag that you go into. But for down here, something like this is perfect. All it is neoprene. Pass it around. Hopefully it's not that cold in a couple weeks, but yeah, does that cover everything?
Let's just talk about bottles, water bottles. I think that's the only thing. Yeah. Oh, I'll talk about that. So a couple things with water bottles. Definitely check out your bike before the race, because some frames have spots for 1 water bottle, some frames have spots for 3 water bottles, and just kind of decide what your strategy is going to be to make sure that you have something liquid to drink on the bike. You might want to just use all of the water for the entire race in your bladder. If you are using a bladder, that's a fine strategy, but it also might be worthwhile to leave some of that water in water bottles on your bike at the bike drop, so you don't have to carry that weight around for the point of time between the start of the race and when you arrive at the bike drop. If you do that, just make sure to keep in mind what the weather conditions are, because if it's super cold, same thing with your food. If your water bottles are exposed to the weather for a long period of time, they'll freeze. Get there and you're out of water and you're really excited to drink something, and you open it up and there's just chunk full of ice. So just kind of make sure you consider that if you're leaving water or other sports drink or any kind of liquid mixture on your bike. And then just make sure that you're, practice with reaching down, getting your water bottle out of the cage, drinking with it on the bike, and then putting it back. Things get a little exciting and crazy when you're riding with other people and in a race situation. So just maybe practice that a couple times. And then if your bike doesn't have as many cages or spots for cages as you want, you can always add water bottle cages with the triathlon style mount off your seat post. So that's what Earl uses because his frame only has a spot for one water bottle, and then he has 2 more behind his saddle, so he can carry up to 3 in a pretty lightweight way. If you do have water bottles behind your saddle, just make sure they're not projectile potentials, because that's, it's in triathlon, you can kind of find the first speed bump of the race because it's marked with all these water bottles that have fallen out of people's cages. So just make sure you kind of
just use like a hair tie. Just wrap. You can just. I normally use like a hair tie or a little bungee, and then it just kind of loop it through the water bottle holder, and then over to the top of the nozzle of the bottle, and that takes care of it. It's not complicated. It just needs to be done because they will go. And then all of a sudden, if you're the last one and nobody's swimming behind you from your team that goes, you might not even notice it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm really ready for that next bottle of water.
So just a couple of little strategies. We talked a little bit about it when we were talking about towing. But if you're on the road, you definitely want to be taking advantage of any drafting advantage you can. So ride in a pace line, put your most powerful or most energetic rider first, and then your less powerful or less energetic riders after them, so that the first person can kind of take all of the wind resistance for the team, and then the remaining riders can benefit from not having to do that. So that's drafting in a single pace line. That's a really good strategy for the road. Even if you're not in a really tight pace line, you do want to stay single file on a road. You want to stay to the far right as far as you can. We don't shut down traffic on any road you're on. This is still open to the public. There's no, the police department or departments have been notified that there's an event going on, but they're not going to be out there, flagging traffic down and creating a path for you. We're just going to coexist like we always do. So just be courteous of drivers and cars. The roads that we pick for the course, we do our very best to keep you off, obviously, major thoroughfares, so there's some pretty quiet portions, but there are going to be some parts of the course where you should expect to see cars and expect to yield to them. And then obviously follow traffic signs like you normally would on a bike and as it's required by law. So stop signs really do mean stop. You can't say, but I'm in a race. It doesn't count. Like, it does count. So you need to stop if there's a stop sign. If there's a traffic light, you need to obey that. So you don't get a get out of jail free card just because you're in a race for that day.
And that's also really important because we want to continue to put on this race, and if all of a sudden we have several people that are running traffic lights and running stop signs, and the policemen and the firemen are getting complaints from people in the area, they know it's us, and we want to come back, so it's just we need to do our due diligence to be respectful of the area because we are representing adventure racing and the community, and we want to continue to be able to race in the area. So same with garbage and those kind of things. Leave no trace and just be respectful, and we'll continue to be able to play in everybody's backyard.
So when you get to single track or trail sections of the course, everyone kind of has their own strategy. I've typically found that put your most technically confident rider in the front of your team. It's kind of like leading by example. So if you have a rider in front of you that's really confident going over different routes or rocks, and they just kind of can take everything in stride and keep going. If you have a rider that's less confident in their bike handling ability, and they see the rider in front of them just kind of go over a log like it's no big deal, then your second person has a better chance of getting over that log successfully, and so does your third rider, and so does your fourth rider. So just in general, we've kind of found like put your most technically confident rider in front when you're on trails, and then just kind of lead by example, and the whole team is going to be a little bit more motivated to conquer some obstacles that maybe they would be a little bit scared to go over if they were on their own. And just kind of speaking to like, I've really been really fortunate to grow a lot in my technical riding ability. I'm not like the best by any means, but starting off in adventure racing, I was a road biker. I was terrified of like even going over gravel, like on roads by driveways and stuff. Like that made me nervous. And so just by kind of following my teammates' example and trying to ride different obstacles that I was maybe a little bit nervous of, it's just really helped me kind of grow and gain new skills. So don't be afraid to try something new, but also respect your personal risk-taking level. Like just because your teammate launches off a huge drop or something doesn't mean you have to. If you're really that scared, like it's okay to just stop, take a breather, hop off your bike, walk around whatever obstacle you're facing, and then just get back on. It doesn't take that much time, and then you'll be safer and you're not dealing with a major injury either.
So yeah, and just to reiterate, some of the teams are going to have one person that's definitely going to be a more technically advanced rider, and there's others that are going to be kind of like, oh boy. But communicate. So if the technically advanced rider is riding ahead, he needs to continue to look back, or her. In our case, it's normally her. Needs to look back and make sure that the teammates are coming. And if you're that person behind, don't be afraid to call out, wait, stop, something like that. Because
I need help, slow down.
And, you tip over and that fast person is gone and around the corner and you need assistance, they're going to have to eventually come back to you, so the sooner they get back, the better off you are.
And then one last thing before, we kind of talked about it in the beginning too, but check your bike over before the race day. Kind of goes without saying, but if you want Alpine Shop to do it, we have a special for racers, half off an 8-point tune. So Alpine Shop, and we can do it for you. Or if you're, confident in your bike mechanic skills, and just make sure your tires are inflated, that your brakes work, that you can actually shift when you tell your bike to shift. Just so you're not coming in here on packet pickup at Friday night and racing over to our bike shop, because that just puts everybody in a really tough situation. So just, give your bike a once-over, go home tonight, check it over. Hopefully you've been riding it, so you kind of know what shape your bike's in, and we can help you, bring it into the shop, and we'd love to help you. Anything else about biking?
I think we're good. It's 8 o'clock, so we'll keep going.
Okay. So just some quick thoughts about teamwork. We've been stressing it kind of all throughout tonight's class, but the more that you can communicate, the better. And there's lots of different kind of ways to do that, but one thing you just really need to know at all times is how your teammates are feeling. If they're feeling great, that's an opportunity for them to carry someone else's pack. If they're feeling not so good, that's a time for either the team to slow down or someone to help them out with either towing, carrying their stuff, maybe just walking next to somebody and talking to them is a really big motivational boost. So just always kind of keep, just pay attention to how your teammates are feeling. We've kind of, you can always just say, how are you doing? How's it going? That's a great way to find out. A lot of teams use on a scale of 1 to 10, how good do you feel right now? And just some way that you can find out, what your teammates are, what's going through their heads and how their bodies are feeling. And eventually you'll pretty much know if you keep racing with the same people, you'll just have one look at them and you can tell, they're at 75% right now. Or you can kind of just give them a once over and know how they're feeling. But in the beginning, when you're racing with maybe some new people, you just want to always make sure that you're aware of what their stoke level is, and hopefully keep it as high as possible for the whole race.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. It's just human nature to not want to be that person that asks for help, but you have teammates around you that want to help, and just little things like taking a couple of items out of your pack, taking 5 pounds out of what you're carrying makes a little bit of difference. Taking somebody's pack or giving up your pack doesn't sound like a big deal, but all of a sudden you're back to just you, and not, especially on a hot day when you have that pack and somebody else takes it, all of a sudden your body temperature goes down, you're easier to move, those kind of things. So it's like, do not be afraid, ask for help, just check your ego, and you'll recover faster the sooner you ask for help. Because if you're keeping up with your teammates and all of a sudden you're not eating enough, or you didn't drink enough, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm working so much harder, I'm not keeping up. It's like, okay, what happened? Didn't eat enough, didn't drink enough. Give up something, get those things in, and you're going to be back in the game. Everybody goes through highs and lows. You could be the strongest person, you're like, yeah, I'm crushing it. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, what just happened? And you're giving up your pack. The person that was struggling is the person that's taking your pack, because all of a sudden they're recovering. And in an 8-hour race, you're not going to see it that much. In a 24-hour race or a multi-day race, it's just leapfrogging all the time. And everybody has their moments of highs and lows, and it's like, one thing about adventure racing is never get too comfortable in the mode you're in, because it doesn't last forever, and you just go through these valleys, and you just learn to push through it and not give up. And it's just, don't let yourself mentally beat yourself up. Go to your teammates, ask for help, and move forward. And that's the thing that I love the most about this sport is you see everybody at their highest highs and their lowest lows, and how resilient the team is to come together. And that's the coolest thing about this sport.
A couple other suggestions about how to work together as a team. Make sure when you're asking about everybody how they're feeling, make sure that everybody's medical needs are being attended to. So number one, if people have different medical situations or allergies, make sure you're aware of that before the race starts. Especially if someone has an EpiPen or something, make sure you know how to operate it. And then just as you're kind of going throughout the race, if blisters can play a big role in how fast the team is going. So if anyone's kind of complaining about, oh, my feet are, kind of hot, spotty, and sore, make sure you take the time to look at them, and if they need to be taped right away, just do that and move on. You can, do it in just a couple minutes, and instead of spending half an hour on really sore, tender, blistered feet a couple hours later. So just make sure everybody's kind of medical needs are being tended to. We talked about this in a previous class, but as you're approaching a TA or a transition area where you change from biking to running or vice versa, or from sport to sport, make sure you talk about it a little bit before you get to the actual transition area. So if people need to, say we're going to go from biking to running or trekking, and people need to change out of their biking shoes and into their trekking shoes, maybe it's getting colder, so we want to put an extra layer on. Just little details like that, make sure you talk through them. If there's map activities that need to happen, like plotting, you won't have to plot on the clock for this race, but anything like that that needs to happen kind of on the admin side of things, checking in with the volunteer, punching the passport, make sure you talk about that with your team before you actually get to the transition area, because they can be kind of chaotic. There's usually more people around. It's really distracting. You just want to stay focused as your own team unit. One thing that's kind of funny, but it also really helps, when you're peeing out there on the race course and you have to use the bathroom, like we're not going to have porta potties everywhere. You just need to be really just discreet and use the woods. But tell your team that you need to pee, and probably someone else has to pee too, so that you can all make that stop together. You obviously don't have to like all pee next to each other or anything, but anytime that the team is stopped, you're all stopped. So think of something useful to do at that time, either using the bathroom, tying your shoe, getting some more food out of your pack. Like, just try to use those team stop times to be productive so that you don't all have to have your own individual stops that can really add up, especially in a sprint race. Also, what you can do as a team is sharing your food and water. This is especially important for anyone that's navigating. You'll have the person that's navigating will have a map in their hand typically. They might have their compass in their other hand. When your hands are full, it's just really hard to eat and feed yourself. So anytime that Earl and I are racing and we're having a candy bar or some cookies, we always try to hand some over to our navigator and just like, would you like an Oreo? Would you like a payday? Just try to keep those options in front of them, because navigating is a really mentally taxing activity, and then your hands are full at the same time. So anytime you can feed your navigator and just help them keep going without stopping and digging into their pack, that really helps too. Anytime you can share gear or clothing, if someone's really cold, they can wear someone's extra waterproof jacket that they're not using. Don't be afraid to just swap gear around as you need it. Just because you're carrying it doesn't mean that you're the only person that can wear that item. So definitely offer up different clothes. We've talked about distributing weight among the team, making sure everybody's packs are loaded relative to their physical strength at that portion of the race. Usually one person out of the team will be kind of the designated mule that carries the team gear. And then during the race, if it's someone that needs to carry a little bit of extra weight, make sure the mule is ready. Make sure that their pack is big enough and easily accessible. Earl has a really great pack for carrying things. He's really good at it. So it's just one clip to open up the top hood, and then a drawstring, and you can just dump a ton of stuff in there. It's really very convenient to have someone on the team that's willing to carry that thing. Let's see. And then we talked about during our navigation class, helping the navigator look for key features like trail junctions, hilltops, any sort of big item that the whole team can help look for and keep everybody on track. Make sure you communicate that. And then you'll typically have someone, the navigator will have the map, but then someone else can have the clue sheet, which will help, clue the team in on what exact feature you're looking for at that checkpoint. So if it's a mailbox or trail junction or a boat ramp, then the whole team can help look for that item. And then another person still can actually have the passport and goes to every flag to physically punch that passport. So kind of distribute those types of activities among your teammates. And then just, anything you can do to keep all of the team's energy focused on moving forward. Anytime that there is a disagreement, some tension or frustration, that's just wasted energy. It's really kind of deceiving how much emotional energy can really affect your physical output. So if there's something that you don't agree with, it's really kind of up to you as a person to be like, okay, if I bring up my disagreement, am I going to help the team? Maybe we truly are lost and I know how to get us back to where we need to be. Or is it going to hurt the team by casting doubt on the navigator and really kind of affecting that team dynamic? So just try to remember that you're racing with friends, and hopefully you want to stay friends at the end of the race. So keep things really positive, and just try to, the more encouragement that you can dish out, it'll come back to you for emotional and physical energy. Anything else that we missed for teamwork? Oh, and one more thing. Sorry. When I want to just really kind of quickly share the story of the team that won the race last year. There was one experienced adventure racer and 3 very new racers. And I just remember talking to the girl on the team. Hi, Julia, if you're watching. And she just was commenting after the race that she had so much fun because her teammates helped her. They carried her stuff. When they were going up steep hills, they would grab her hand and help carry, or not carry her, but like help her up those hills. And it was just a really great experience, and it really kind of warmed my heart to hear that this was a rookie team. They went into the race they wanted to go fast, but they also wanted to have a great time. And I think all 4 of them crossed the finish line really proud of their achievement, and they worked really well together. So just think about how you make people feel out there, and you want to cross the finish line, being really proud of everybody's composure and effort on the race course.
So and that's kind of what I was going to go into, and the question was written here, and I don't know, maybe you did say it, and I was just dazing off, but what can you do to make the slowest person go faster? That's the question. And it's like, these are conversations to have before the race, during the race, because you don't know who the slowest person's going to be at any given time. But it's like, again, weight distribution, just talking things out, making sure everybody's eating. We go up a lot of hills hand in hand, just kind of, let's go. Not a lot of pull, but, here you go. Then we have, and then just communication and working together, and it's going to be a fun race. Mm-hmm. Okay, questions from you guys? Anything? Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit about like competitive mountain biking. I don't know, on a single track and a race environment. Sometimes things can get a little confusing. Talk about the etiquette your guys experience.
Great question. Yeah. So during the race, we're not going to be necessarily. Well, obviously, we're not starting on bike because there's a bike drop. So during the race, a very strong biking team might fall behind in the beginning stages, and then when we finally get to the biking, this might be like their time to shine. And except we've got all these teams in front of them that were stronger on the earlier portions of the race, and now they really want to gain an advantage on the biking sections. Obviously, if you're on a road, there will most likely be room to pass as long as you check for traffic. It's the common courtesy to just tell teams when you're passing, hey, we're on your left, pass them. Probably you should say, keep up the good work, or encourage them when you're going by at a really fast rate of speed. And then, just make a really quick, decisive pass. Make sure your teammates are all together so you can get out of the traffic lane as soon as you can. If you're on single track, there is less room to pass. The trails that we are using, it kind of varies. Some of the sections are pretty self-explanatory. The woods are really open. You can just kind of scoot right around them on the trail. But there's going to be some sections that the trail is really narrow. So you just kind of need to use your best judgment. In general, what at least I found is that teams that are not as strong of a biking team they know it, and they hear, that the head of steam biking team coming up behind them. They're just going to hop off to the side and let the stronger bikers go around. But if that's not the case, maybe they don't hear you, or they are super competitive and trying to block the trail. That's not very good sportsmanship. So just let the team in front of you know that you're there. Make sure that your team is right with you and ready to make a pass, so it doesn't drag on for a mile or something. Make sure you're all ready to make the pass, kind of in a short, efficient way. And then just say, hey, we're on your left. We're coming around. If at the next opportunity, could you stop and we'll all go around? If it's really narrow, or if there's enough room to pass with the woods and the trees are on the trail at that time, just scoot right around. So that's kind of, everyone out there, be nice to each other. We have prizes at the end of this thing, but they're not anything that you can use for a paycheck or kind of at the end of the day. It's more for the fun of it. We want to recognize our top performers, but we're not here to make professional athletes out of anybody. So just be nice to each other. What other questions?
If for some reason a 4-person team lost somebody that weekend, your truck, lightning strike, whatever, can we run it as a 3-person team? Will we be disqualified, but can we still do it?
Great question. So if you're originally a 4-person team and at the very last minute you find yourself down one person. This only applies to 4-person teams because we don't want solos on our course. So if you're a 2-person team and your one teammate drops out at the last minute, you either need to find a replacement at the last minute or come help us volunteer and we'll find a spot for you. But if you're a 4-person and you only have 3 people available, we'll do our best to let you start. It's just not, you obviously won't be ranked in any way, but we want to, let everyone experience the course as much as we can. Leading up into the race, if team members shift around, that's normal. It's actually, some people have said that the hardest part of adventure racing is getting your original team that you signed up with together at the starting line, uninjured and unimpeded by life's, great complications. So if there's people that need to be switched out, we're happy to accommodate that. Payment is on you guys how to figure that out, but we just need a waiver from your new replacement teammate, and you can do that at packet pickup.
If you did the 3, I guess you put 3 people on a canoe, or?
Yeah, probably the way that we do it would be 3 people in a canoe. The middle person's gonna not be super chipper. There's no seat there. There's lots of water in the bottom of the canoe. It's hard to paddle. But you will get to experience the course.
Yeah,
So.
we will be sending 3 people in one boat. We're not going to put an individual in a boat. But we really, really, really want 4-person teams. That's what you signed up for, and that's what we want to send out on the course. 2s and 4s.
And it's this is one of the reasons that we started. We've got our wait list going. We've got our Facebook page going. So if you find yourself, you're down a teammate, definitely reach out to me, reach out to Facebook Land. There's some really great stories about adventure races in foreign countries that have found local participants who didn't speak the language of their team willing to give races a go. So there's always that option as a total stranger. But we just want 4 people and 2 people in our team categories.
Yes.
Are we always on a trail or road? No bushwhacking kind of situation, or? No, okay. I just didn't know if it was not friendly for the.
You will be off trail.
Okay.
Are you asking about totally or on bike specifically?
No, just both.
So
if I'm navigating and I say, well, gosh, this navigation point doesn't. It would be shorter to go that way. I just want to make sure it's okay to go.
Yes.
And not have to
encourage.
Preserve. Okay.
Yep. The only out of bounds areas will be marked on your map, and they're almost, I think, 99% private property. So obviously there's no trespassing. We've set up the course so that private property is really not a great route choice anyway. So you shouldn't be tempted to cut through anybody's yard. But in general, if there's, point A and point B, and the only way between the two is just open woods, go straight between them.
And so, I guess to clarify also, you will be off trail more on foot than on bike. There will be some opportunities or chances that you will be off trail on your bike, but not a lot. That's fair.
I don't recall you mentioning food before, but you mentioned Oreos twice, you mentioned paydays. Any other suggestions?
That's nice.
Oh, is it?
Food-wise?
Okay. All right, then
I do like Oreos. Let's see, my favorite stuff lately.
I was at the grocery store, so the holiday Oreos are out. They have, chocolate, hot chocolate, and a red one, and then another peppermint one. 4th of July Oreos were amazing out in Wyoming. Hot Rocks. So anything that you get Halloween candy is really good because it's like all the kind bars, all the payday bars. Those things are great too, but it's just mix it up.
We've actually lately had a lot of success with just regular food. So we've been packing turkey sandwiches, not very exciting, like when you consider sports nutrition, like, okay, you can do this with turkey sandwiches, but they're really easy to eat, they're yummy, they're not crazy flavors, so if your stomach's a little upset, they're just pretty basic. But yeah, we'll talk about food kind of more in depth, but those are our favorites. Just because it's not in a sports wrapper doesn't mean you can't eat it in a sports event. So don't limit yourself to gels and sports-specific bars by any means.
And anything that makes you happy is good. So, I mean, there's just certain foods that you're like, whoa, this is, gets me out of a dark spot at work. I'll get you out of a dark spot on the trail. So we can get into this. I think that's next week. What else?
What if you lose a teammate due to injury or emergency or what have you during the race?
Yes, great question. So if you start the race with a full team and something happens during the event, either an injury with one of your teammates is unable to continue, or there's some other outside event that they have to leave the course, that is allowable as long as you do two things. Number one, you can't race by yourself. So if you're a two-person team and your other teammate drops out due to one of those reasons, you need to drop out as well. And then you need to also let somebody know that's a human in person. So you can't just, you're at checkpoint 3 and it's in the middle of the woods and someone sprains an ankle and you're like, oh, well, we're still really close to the starting line, so we're just going to go back to the parking lot and get in our car and I'll take you to urgent care. It'll be fine. Like, you need to talk to someone at one of the TAs, call one of us. Our phone numbers will be on your clue sheet that you're required to carry during the race. We just need to make sure we know where everybody is so that when 4 o'clock comes around and we're counting teams at the finish line and we're missing somebody, we know what's happening. But yeah, if someone needs to drop out, just the other thing you need to consider is making sure that you still carry all of your mandatory team gear. So if they had, your like mandatory UTM plotter or something in their pack, you need to make sure that you get that from them to keep going.
The other thing is if it is a major injury, 911 is going to be your first phone call. Neither one of us are doctors or medics, and they know the course, they know where we're going to be at, they know we're there, so when they get that call, they're like, oh, they're part of the Castlewood race, we've got the tools, we've got the equipment to get there. So 911 to them, and then let us know when it's figured out. But and then we'll be rotating. The two of us are going to be rotating through the course. You're going to see us at different TAs. If you have if you have questions, those kind of things, talk to us. Volunteers are there to help you, but they're not privy to all the information of the race like we are. So if you have a complaint, say thank you to the volunteer, and we appreciate
Come yell at us.
Come yell at us. Hopefully we're doing everything we can to make everything almost perfect, but we're human too. But the course, as far as we know, should be good. But any complaints, come to us, not our volunteers.
And just kind of along that same vein, the volunteers, if you ask them a question about mandatory gear or some race rule, and they're not expected to answer you, they can give you their opinion, but it's not any, legally binding decision in terms of the race rules. So if you have a question about that, let us know. Give us a phone call. There's no penalty for calling one of us. We don't want really everyone to call us just to be like, are you sure you want us to paddle in this river? Did you know it's really cold? But if there's like a legitimate issue on the course, or you think a checkpoint is missing, like that's kind of one of the beautiful things about cell phone is you can make that phone call. So that's that. Other questions? All right, cool. That's it. Thank you, Sue and Kent, for coming to class all the way from Minnesota. We'll stick around like we do, and if you have any other questions, let us know. And then our last class is Monday, Monday, week of Thanksgiving, and then after that, it's just the race left. So, cool.
Thank you guys.
Yep.
Thank you
Thanks.
guys.